You didn't Google these motherfuckers? Going on Oprah, I didn't know. I had no idea how racist they were. It's the royal family. You didn't Google these motherfuckers? Oh. The fuck? It's the royal family. They're the original racists. They invented colonialism.
One comedian, one sharp line, and suddenly every joke people had been holding back for years was wide open again. For the longest time, comics tiptoed around these two like they were walking on glass. A light jab here, a safe punchline there. Nothing too bold, nothing too real. Then Chris Rock stepped onto that Netflix stage and flipped the whole mood in seconds. He said what half the planet had already been whispering, but was too nervous to say out loud. He zeroed in on that story about not even Googling the most famous family on Earth. A royal institution with 1,000 years of history, documented, televised, written about in every language you can think of. And we're supposed to believe she never typed their name into a search bar? Chris wasn't buying it. And honestly, most people watching at home weren't either. The crowd felt it. The internet felt it. It was that moment where the room shifts and everyone realizes the gloves are off. Then came the analogy. So clean, so simple. So on point that it spread across social media in minutes. The Budweiser line became instant legend. It wasn't long, it wasn't complicated, but it hit hard. You could disagree with it if you wanted, but you couldn't ignore it. That's when the energy changed from playful teasing to something sharper. Not cruel, not reckless, just bold. And then he stepped into the biggest controversy of all. The headline that had dominated news cycles for weeks. The question about what the baby might look like. It had been framed as proof that everything behind palace walls was broken beyond repair. A moment, treated like it defined an entire institution. Chris broke it down in 10 seconds flat. He reframed it as something ordinary people talk about every day. Family curiosity, the kind of thing relatives speculate about at kitchen tables without a second thought.
Into the Budweiser family and going, they drink a lot. This motherfucker is invested in slavery like it was Shark Tank.
By saying it plainly, he stripped the drama away. What had been presented as this shocking turning point suddenly looked different. Not erased, not dismissed, just viewed through another lens. And that was the real twist. Once he said it out loud, once he showed you could question the storyline without everything collapsing, the fear around joking about it disappeared. The tension snapped, the room laughed. And just like that, a topic that felt untouchable was back in the arena of open conversation. Everyone else lined up to take their shot, and Colin Jost did not waste a single second warming up the crowd. No soft intro, no polite setup, just straight to the point. He basically summed it up in one brutal observation that had the whole room reacting. Let that sink in for a moment. Britain doesn't seem eager to welcome them back. America doesn't seem thrilled to fully claim them either. Two massive countries, billions of people, and somehow they're floating in between like international hot potatoes with nowhere comfortable to land. Then Joss turned up the heat. He reminded viewers exactly where the story started. An actress from Suits, not a blockbuster movie icon, not an award season regular, not even the lead of the show. A supporting role on a cable legal drama that many Americans had barely heard of before the royal romance began. That's the leap. That's the pivot. From palace balconies to Hollywood brand deals. And when SNL imagined a spin-off called Unemployed Immigrant, the crowd gasped and laughed at the same time. Calling a prince, grandson of a queen, son of a king, an unemployed immigrant on primetime television, and nobody rushed to defend it. That's when you know the mood has shifted in a big way. Then came the lifestyle show. If you missed it, you missed one of the most talked about moments online. The tip? Take pretzels out of one bag, put them in another bag, write a cute label with a fancy marker. That's it. That's the segment. Jimmy Fallon looked genuinely stunned breaking it down, repackaging store-bought snacks and presenting it like a groundbreaking domestic hack.
To know how brown the baby's gonna be. I'm like, that's not racist. Cause even black people wanna know how brown the baby gonna be.
This is someone who once lived inside actual palaces, surrounded by history and luxury. And now the big reveal is decorative snack storage. The internet had a field day with that one. Fallon also couldn't ignore the shift in status. A prince of England, sixth in line to the throne at one point. Grandson of the longest reigning monarch in British history. Now joked about as a warehouse manager for pricey jam and artisanal honey. The contrast writes its own punchline. And then there's the memoir. Record-breaking sales. Hundreds of pages diving deep into family tension, childhood struggles, intensely personal memories, and details many people never expected to hear. Late-night hosts didn't hold back. Jimmy Kimmel turned parts of it into a headline-ready monologue. When private stories become global content, the jokes are going to follow. Stephen Colbert zeroed in on the branding, the initials, the polished image, framing themselves almost like a luxury label instead of two public figures who keep saying they want less attention while continuing to sit down for major interviews. That contradiction became comedy gold. And at the Golden Globes, in a room filled with A-list actors, writers, and directors who grind for decades to secure one major deal, a single joke summed up the public frustration. Huge contracts, massive headlines. Yet ask the average viewer to name the content, and many struggle. That contrast is what made the punchline land so hard. American comedians were sharp, but the British reaction carried something extra. For many in the UK, this wasn't just celebrity gossip. Harry wasn't only a public figure. He was the young boy they saw walking behind his mother's coffin on live television. They watched him grow up. They defended him through past controversies. They cheered his military service. They saw him as part of their national story. So when interviews aired criticizing his family and the institution they associate with centuries of tradition,
President Trump also announced a new trade deal with the UK that will reopen British markets for American companies. All that Britain demands in return is that we keep these two.
it hit differently over there. When British comedians stepped up to the mic, the tone felt less playful and more personal. Not just jokes for laughs, but commentary layered with disappointment and frustration. That's when satire turned into something sharper, and the divide between audiences on both sides of the Atlantic became impossible to ignore. Jimmy Carr kicked it off by pointing out the contradiction nobody in polite circles was supposed to say out loud. The image of a lifelong feminist, independent, and career-driven, suddenly stepping away from it all the moment royalty entered the picture. Carr didn't whisper it either. He leaned in. The audience felt that sharp edge. Then he twisted the knife a little more. Taxpayer money-funding interviews about how unbearable a taxpayer-funded lifestyle supposedly was. That irony was too loud to ignore. And then, yes, the costume. That infamous photo that refuses to disappear. It's been years, but the image still floats around online like it's glued there. No sit-down interview, no glossy documentary, no polished speech about growth can fully erase it. That's why comedians keep circling back to it. It's a visual that clashes hard with later messaging about tolerance and moral leadership. The contrast is so strong, it practically writes the punchline by itself. Simon Brodkin took a different route. He didn't just skim headlines. He sat down and watched the entire Netflix documentary, all 6 episodes. Every dramatic pause, every tearful moment, every carefully framed handhold and slow-motion stare. He went in expecting to understand their side better. That's what long-form storytelling is supposed to do, right? Build empathy, add depth. Instead, he came out saying it felt more like a brand rollout than a raw love story. The nicknames, the constant touching, the dramatic beats before answers that sounded rehearsed. For him, it felt staged, not spontaneous. Then he pulled a moment from the memoir that made audiences.
Elon built electric cars, he's going to Mars. Why is he even involving himself with Twitter? It would be like if the Prince of England gave it all up just to marry an actor from Suits.
Blink twice. When personal stories are shared in extreme detail, the reaction can swing fast. Some readers saw honesty, others saw oversharing. And when comparisons start popping up online, especially involving other controversial royal figures, that's when you know public perception has shifted. 6 episodes and 1 massive book later, a lot of neutral viewers said they finally understood why frustration had been building. Not because they hated them, but because the presentation felt overproduced. Brodkin also mocked the idea that basic royal protocol was treated like some shocking ordeal. Dating into one of the oldest institutions in the world comes with traditions. That's not a secret. His point was simple. Maybe ask about the rules before saying yes. It's not rocket science. Then Kelly Osbourne stepped in, and her perspective carried weight. She grew up in televised chaos, real chaos. Cameras inside her home for years. Addiction struggles, health scares, public meltdowns, raw family arguments broadcast for the world to see. The Osbournes didn't hide dysfunction. They aired it. So when Kelly says someone is being dramatic, people listen. She doesn't sugarcoat. No diplomatic phrasing, just straight talk. Her bigger argument? Every opportunity was there. Every platform. Every global spotlight. And somehow they kept tripping over their own message. The image of past mistakes colliding with present moral positioning created a contradiction too big for comedians to ignore. Sharon Osbourne pushed it further. In her view, drama became the product. Without family tension, without public conflict, what's left to sell? No explosive headlines, no gripping interviews, no controversy-driven buzz. That was her blunt take. Sharon even shared her own story of family betrayal. Real financial loss, real hurt. And yet she still showed up when it mattered. Her implication was clear. Cutting ties over public narratives feels extreme to some observers.
ABC has announced plans for a spin-off to the hit series Suits. It will focus on Meghan Markle's character's struggle to balance her legal career while also caring for an unemployed immigrant.
Coming from someone who has watched fame tear marriages apart for decades, her warning about how celebrity pressure can strain relationships didn't sound like gossip. It sounded like experience talking. And then Bill Maher stepped in, not with punchlines, but with analysis. He framed it less as scandal and more as a case study in modern fame. In an era where branding, victimhood, activism, and entertainment blur together, he argued the line between authenticity and performance gets thinner every year. That's what made this whole saga such irresistible material for comedians. Not just the drama, but the contradictions layered inside it. When image and reality clash that loudly, late-night writers don't have to stretch for jokes. They just point at the headline and let the audience connect the dots. A book tour to promote a book about wanting privacy. Media appearances to explain how exhausting media appearances are. Do you see the contradiction? It's right there in plain sight. Queen Elizabeth operated on a completely different wavelength. Her approach was simple. Say less, do more. Dignity through silence. Strength through restraint. She didn't clap back. She didn't overshare. She showed up, did the work, and let time handle the rest. That quiet discipline built respect over decades. Complaining on television rarely earns sympathy. Consistency and composure usually do. Now compare that to a 16-bathroom mansion in Montecito, neighbors with Oprah and Ellen, private jets to global conferences about climate issues while lecturing everyday people about shrinking their carbon footprints. That's where a lot of the public frustration lives. It's not just about privacy, it's about optics. When the lifestyle looks ultra-exclusive but the messaging centers on hardship, people notice the gap. And here's the deeper issue critics keep raising. It doesn't feel like they just want space. It feels like they want agreement. Total agreement. Full validation. A version of events accepted without question.
What is the number one question that mystifies scientists?
Is there life on another planet?
Oh no. Why does Meghan Markle make her own pretzel bags? They don't know why.
That's interesting. She takes it from one bag and puts it in another bag.
There's another bag.
And that's confusing.
The moment someone points out inconsistencies, they're labeled the villain, the bully, the problem. That dynamic has worn thin for many viewers. When South Park dedicated an entire episode to the saga, it wasn't subtle. The Worldwide Privacy Tour showed animated versions flying around on a private jet with megaphones, demanding to be left alone, landing in country after country to announce how much they dislike attention. It was exaggerated, yes, but the joke landed because the contradiction felt familiar. Privacy while filming a 6-part documentary, privacy while doing magazine covers, privacy while accepting awards in packed rooms. The irony became the punchline. Family Guy took a swing too, boiling everything down to one sharp scene about regret and reinvention. Sometimes one animated joke hits harder than a full monologue because it captures what people already suspect. Late-night writers didn't need wild setups. The material was sitting right there in headlines. Then there was Spitting Image, the British puppet show known for pushing boundaries. Their portrayal leaned into themes of control, image management, and entitlement, all through exaggerated puppets. It was satire, but it felt close enough to spark uncomfortable conversations. Some clips later became harder to find online, which only fueled more curiosity. Attempts to quiet satire often have the opposite effect. The internet rarely forgets. On the business side, the scoreboard has been rough. The Spotify deal ended. The Archetypes podcast didn't continue. A public comment from a Spotify executive labeling them grifters made headlines and signaled frustration behind the scenes. The Netflix partnership delivered a documentary that drew huge numbers, though critics argued much of the viewership was curiosity-driven. Since then, projects have struggled to maintain momentum. And then there's the lifestyle brand.
This Meghan Markle announced that her As Ever product line sold out in under an hour. It's strange when you marry a prince and you're the breadwinner of the family. Meghan was excited while Prince Harry was like, what the hell am I going to do with 3,000 cases of wildflower?
Premium jam, artisanal honey, high-priced dog treats, products that resemble items found at local markets but come with a royal title attached and a luxury markup. Conan O'Brien and Ryan Reynolds turned it into recurring comedy material. The jam, the honey, the pretzel bag moment. It all became shorthand for celebrity ventures that feel disconnected from everyday life. The pattern is clear. Every launch becomes a late-night segment. Every interview becomes social media commentary. Every attempt to control the narrative sparks more satire. Instead of escaping the spotlight, they've become steady content for everyone else's platform. And in today's entertainment cycle, once you become the punchline, the jokes don't slow down, they multiply. Think about the irony for a second. They stepped away from the royal system because they said they didn't want to live inside someone else's institution. They wanted independence, freedom, the chance to build their own empire on their own terms. And now, they've become content. Animated characters on South Park, punchlines on late night, endless material for commentary channels and satirists. It's a twist nobody could have scripted better. They left one powerful structure only to become raw material for dozens of others. The difference is huge. The royal family offered a framework, protection, a defined role, clear expectations. The entertainment industry doesn't operate like that. It feeds on relevance, it rewards spectacle, and once the spotlight hits, it doesn't gently dim. It keeps demanding more, louder, bigger, flashier. That's a tough machine to stand inside. What's fascinating is how different comedians with totally different styles all circled the same theme. Chris Rock questioned the narrative. Colin Jost highlighted the awkward global in-between status. Jimmy Fallon zeroed in on the pretzel bag moment.
Harry, whose memoir just broke the Guinness record for fastest-selling nonfiction book of all time, the story of Prince Harold and his frozen yogurt slinger, is so popular, they're now releasing a version for kids. I don't know if you know about this. It's a twist on The Princess and the Pea. It's called The Prince and the Pea.
Harry and Meghan say they'd now like to split their time between spending your money in the UK and spending your money in Canada.
Kelly Osbourne pushed back on what she saw as non-stop complaining. Bill Maher framed it as modern hypocrisy. South Park turned the contradictions into animation so obvious even casual viewers couldn't miss it. Different tones, different punchlines, same conclusion. The core issue critics keep repeating is consistency. You can't call for privacy while signing major documentary deals and sitting down for headline interviews. You can't talk about how overwhelming attention is while actively participating in global press tours. You can't frame life as unbearable hardship from a Montecito mansion surrounded by luxury and influence. And you can't position yourself as relatable victims when your reality includes resources most people will never experience. It's not that people don't understand stress or family conflict, it's that the messaging and the lifestyle don't seem aligned. When the image says one thing and the actions suggest another, audiences react. Not always with anger, sometimes with sarcasm, sometimes with full-blown satire. That's what happens when contradictions become visible. And once that perception sets in, it spreads fast. The internet doesn't debate quietly. It memes, it clips, it remixes. Every interview becomes a reaction video. Every product launch becomes a late-night monologue. Every attempt to control the story creates more angles for someone else to flip it. In trying to escape one system, they've entered a new one where public opinion moves quicker and hits harder. At the end of the day, the frustration many express isn't about titles or geography. It's about mixed signals. If you want privacy, step back. If you want public influence, own it. If you want sympathy, live in a way that matches the story you're telling. Audiences today are sharp. They spot gaps fast.
Watch the Harry and Meghan Netflix documentary. Now, I'll be honest with you, before I watched it, I was not a fan of theirs. But now I've actually heard their side of the story, I hate them. They started off and they're making interesting points about racism and misogyny. Then they start calling each other H&M, and I just thought, oh, do off.
And when those gaps widen, the comedians don't even have to write jokes. They just point, smile, and let the contradiction speak for itself. You cannot control a narrative when your own words keep colliding with each other, and that's really what this all comes down to. When statements shift, when interviews contradict earlier interviews, when the tone changes depending on the platform, people notice. Audiences today are not passive. They rewind clips, they compare timelines, they screenshot quotes, and once they start spotting inconsistencies, trust erodes fast. What makes this situation different from normal celebrity teasing is the emotional investment people once had. This wasn't just another Hollywood couple launching a brand. This was a prince people watched grow up in real time. This was a royal wedding that pulled in millions of viewers around the world. There was genuine goodwill at the beginning. There was excitement. There was hope. That's why the shift in public opinion feels so dramatic. It's not built on envy. It's built on confusion. The public sat through the high-profile interviews. They streamed the documentary series. They read the headline-making book excerpts. They saw the magazine covers, the award show speeches, the carefully staged photos. And instead of clarity, many felt like they were getting layers of performance. Each appearance was meant to explain everything once and for all, yet somehow each one introduced new angles, new grievances, new details that didn't always align with earlier versions. Over time, it became harder for viewers to track what was consistent and what wasn't. And here's the part that hit hardest for critics. the expansion of victimhood alongside visible privilege. On one hand, there were deeply personal accounts of hurt, rejection, and emotional strain.
Starts describing this one date with Meghan as the night, let me quote you here, me and M pulled the pin on a fun grenade. I actually started rooting for Prince Andrew. They were very worried about their safety, which I get that aspect of things after 6 episodes. I wanted to...
On the other hand, there were images of a 16-bathroom mansion in Montecito, celebrity neighbors, private jet travel, global brand deals, multi-million-dollar contracts. For many observers, those two realities clashed loudly. People can understand emotional struggles. What they struggle with is messaging that seems disconnected from the lifestyle on display. This is where disbelief takes root. Not cruelty, not blind loyalty to tradition, just disbelief. When a narrative feels inconsistent, audiences instinctively pull back. They don't always rage. Sometimes they just laugh. And that laughter is what we've seen ripple through late-night monologues, animated satire, and social media commentary. It's not always malicious. Often it's just the sound of people saying, "This doesn't add up." When Sharon Osbourne suggested the trajectory could end badly, it didn't land as a random jab. It sounded like someone who has watched celebrity culture chew people up for decades. She has seen what happens when stars cut off long-standing relationships, when entourages grow protective, when honest feedback disappears. Fame can distort reality. It can create a bubble where every decision feels justified because no one close is willing to challenge it. That pattern has played out again and again in entertainment history. The irony is that many of the comedians weren't even coordinating. Chris Rock approached it from one angle, Colin Jost from another. Bill Maher dissected it philosophically. Animated shows exaggerated the contradictions. Yet despite the different styles, the through line was similar. They all zeroed in on the gap between words and actions, between privacy and publicity, between hardship and luxury, between wanting to step back and continuing to step forward into the spotlight. And here's the uncomfortable truth. Once satire sticks, it's hard to shake. You can issue statements. You can hire new PR teams.
Harry says, how do you explain to someone who've just started dating that they have to curtsy to your own grandmother?
How do you explain that you bow to your grandmother and that you will need to curtsy, especially to an American? Like, that's weird.
And I'm thinking, maybe just tell her that your grandmother is the fucking...
You can reframe your mission. But if the public has already labeled the situation contradictory, every new move is filtered through that lens. Launch a lifestyle product, it becomes material. Sign a new deal, it becomes a punchline. Give another interview, it becomes a clip waiting to be dissected. The cycle feeds itself. It's also important to recognize that modern audiences are deeply skeptical of branding disguised as authenticity. People can spot when a narrative feels overly polished, when vulnerability seems curated, when romance feels staged for the camera. That doesn't mean emotions aren't real. It means perception becomes everything. And once perception turns, regaining it requires consistency over time, not more headlines. The biggest challenge isn't public mockery, it's credibility. If viewers feel like they're being sold different versions of the same story depending on the platform, they disengage. And disengagement is far more damaging than criticism. Critics at least care enough to comment. Indifference is silence. That's the real risk in any celebrity arc. Another factor is expectation. When someone steps away from a historic institution claiming they want a quieter life, people expect a quieter life. When instead they see documentaries, podcasts, interviews, and brand launches, the contrast sparks confusion. It creates the feeling that the exit wasn't about stepping back, but about stepping into a different spotlight. Whether that perception is fair or not, it's powerful. And perception in the media world often becomes reality. The laughter that echoes through comedy stages isn't necessarily hatred. It's a signal, a sign that the public conversation has shifted from sympathy to skepticism. Once that shift happens, the tone of coverage changes. The benefit of the doubt shrinks. Every inconsistency becomes magnified.
Twat. I think he's a fucking twat. He's a whining, whinging, complaining, woe is me, I'm the only one that's ever had mental problems.
Every contradiction becomes amplified, and every attempt to correct the record risks creating a new headline. There's also the human element. Fame is isolating. Pressure is intense. Family conflicts are messy. It's easy for outsiders to forget that behind the headlines are real people navigating real emotions. But public figures also have to understand that transparency invites scrutiny. When you open the door to your story in a global way, the world is going to analyze it. That's not cruelty. That's the trade-off of influence. And that brings us back to the core issue. The problem isn't perception alone. It's the tension between message and lifestyle, between claiming to want distance and continuing to pursue visibility. Until those two things align, the jokes will keep coming, the satire will keep circulating, the commentary will keep multiplying, because contradiction is irresistible fuel for entertainment. So now it's your turn. Which moment hit the hardest for you? Was it a stand-up routine that made you rethink everything? An animated episode that exaggerated the irony? A late-night monologue that nailed the inconsistency? Drop your thoughts in the comments below. I genuinely want to hear where you stand on all of this. If you made it all the way through this deep dive, you're clearly invested in how this story unfolds. Go ahead and like this video if you found it interesting, subscribe so you don't miss the next breakdown, and share it with someone who's been following this saga just as closely as you have. This conversation isn't fading anytime soon, and I'll see you in the next one.